Members from oil and gas industry, members of Petroleum Engineering Association, my ex-colleagues, friends and fraternity from oil and gas industry. I'm really glad to talk to you on a different kind of topic. So many a times, in the last 3 decades, I used to talk on multiple things like plant automation, the process plant, refining, engineering. But today I'm going to talk on a different subject. So it's all about storytelling. So many of you may be wondering how storytelling is relevant for any corporate environment, specifically oil and gas. And I'm not only going to tell about stories, I'm going to tell about business storytelling. So today, if you go to any management consulting firm, they advocate storytelling is the only way to engage with your audience, whether your stakeholders are customers, team members, management, or your own peers. So let me quickly give an introduction about the storytelling and with a very specific reference to business storytelling, and then move on to storytelling with relevance to oil and gas. What is business storytelling? Even I was clueless when this term storytelling was used in the corporate world. How storytelling is going to be relevant? Can I go and tell a grandma story or the crow and fox story or any fairy tales in a corporate ambience? How it is going to be relevant? Later, I come to know that here in a corporate ambience, when we mean storytelling, it is not about the actual story, it is all about some interesting anecdotes or case studies or something interesting happened in the industry. So this is what we known as we have known as business storytelling. Why at all business storytelling? Why it's getting so much of prominence in the current days? The reason is many organizations come out with a lot of new initiatives, starting with ISO 9000, ISO 14000, or if it is an IT organization, CMMA level 5. Oh, so many new initiatives are, to today's context, digital transformation. So many new initiatives are brought in, and the communication percolates down from top to bottom. So the top management gives a kind of training to the managers, and the managers they act as a the trainers, and then they go and interact with the the ground level staff members. But ultimately, all these initiatives they get implemented with a time lag or cost variance. So nothing is happening as planned. Very rarely the projects or programs are executed in a planned fashion. The reason is the communication is not happening in a very engaged manner. So people come out with a lot of slide decks, and obviously in a corporate ambience, you can see pie charts, bar charts, whatnot. So these kind of numbers, facts, figures. So the emotional touch is missing, and because of this emotional touch is absent, people are unable to get involved into the subject. And finally, at the end of the session, people are not getting connected, and the message received is far less. So that is where storytelling is coming into play a huge role. And today we talk about storytelling in multiple perspective, but I am going to give a complete clarity about what is known as personal storytelling and business storytelling. This is very much essential as context setting. So personal storytelling, the prime intent is to entertain, motivate, and inspire. So it can be your student community or it can be your club members, etc. While business storytelling is not limited to motivation and inspiration, but it is also used for brand building or drive home core corporate values. What do we mean by core corporate values? It can be financial management, productivity, optimization, or environmental control, or honesty, integrity, customer values, or investors' values. So all this would be corporate values. So business storytelling would talk one or more of such corporate core values. And the personal storytelling generally revolve around the speaker, either himself or herself, or he will talk about his close kith and kin, friends, families, relatives, etc. And at the end of the personal storytelling, his aim is to inspire the audience so that the audience, they take a vow to do something different. So it can be a motivational talk, for example. But here, the corporate storytelling, the business storytelling revolves more around customers and team members. So I'm not going to talk about my personal story, how I underwent a lot of hardship while to pass my intermediate exam or to complete my engineering degree. So whether I studied under street light, I'm not going to talk about all this in the corporate ambience. So maybe when I want to inspire my team members once in a while, I can do that, but that is not the predominant theme. So here the theme is revolving around customers, team members, and other stakeholders. And in the personal storytelling, the source of stories can be personal experience. Since I mentioned about personal story, obviously it will be personal experience, or sometimes you even narrate folklore or historical events. Even if you see very big motivational speakers, still they quote about folk tales and Aesop's tales, Panchadantras, and finally they try to come out with some core values which may be applicable for corporate value. But in generally business storytelling, these stories often are business case studies, corporate incidents, success stories. For example, I followed certain process, and because of that process, I achieved my productivity. Because of that, I was able to achieve cost control. So success stories, or sometimes even it need not be success stories. Even you can share lessons learned. I made a mistake, and I don't want my own peers or any other community members, they should not do the same kind of mistakes, and because of that I am going to share such incident. So that is known as lessons learned. And in personal storytelling, the articulation is very important. The articulation revolves around the delivery mechanisms like body language, vocal variety, little bit of dramatization may be required. Vocal variety by increasing the volume, reducing the volume, or adjusting the pitch modulation. All this they are going to play an important role. So today people, they don't stand behind a podium, so they take a cordless mic and then talk in front of the audience. They walk through the stage, or sometimes they mingle with the audience. But whereas in the corporate business storytelling, the content is more important than the delivery mechanism. So at the end of the day, the audience, your team members or your customers, they are not going to be excited when you do all kind of the the so-called gimmicks revolving around the body language or vocal variety. So they want some clear takeaways or messages. And in personal storytelling, emotions play a vital role. So emotions generally, when we involve people, we talk about different emotions, and using arousing the five senses, we try to create the different kind of moods, and through which we are able to transport the audience to a particular scenario and then convey the story. Whereas in the business storytelling, we are going to talk more about facts, figures, of course, almost like you're presenting with a PowerPoint, but slightly, no, we are making it interesting so that audience are glued to you or completely in agreement with you throughout your speech, and finally they remember your speech. Once they remember your speech and a message, then the the take home values will be definitely be followed. And today I have customized my business storytelling to the oil and gas industry. What are all the kind of um, stories that can be mentioned in the oil and gas industry? So as mentioned in the previous slide, so I can use the business storytelling techniques in corporate events like customer meets, team meets, customer presentation, launch of new initiatives. So there will be, in fact, if you go to oil and gas industry, there are several specific events are celebrated. For example, you have a National Safety Week, Safety Day. Then there is a specific day to create awareness on vigilance, how to be vigilant, in terms of security and safety. and sometimes it may be something related to cyber security. So a lot of such milestone events are happening. Productivity week celebration, or idea junction, or innovation week. So several such events are happening, and these are all the occasions. As a supervisor or as a manager, you can tell stories to your team members, and even at times you can also tell stories in front of your customers. So let me start with a very simple or interesting anecdote. So when I try to understand the earliest reference of petroleum industry, recorded reference, so this has happened so a long time back, right? Probably if you can recollect your history lessons studied in school days, you would have come across a Persian poet known as Firdausi. Firdausi. Have you heard about this person? Persian poet. So if you can mention it in the chat window, or you can unmute and say. I'm not sure whether the chat window is enabled to the audience. So you can mention, or you can unmute and say. Have you come across this person, Persian poet Firdausi? So even if you don't know him, see his popular work, the Persian compilation of poem is known as Shahnama. Shahnama is a huge compilation of poems, and here he has compiled the historic lives of kings, queens, and then the kingdoms, etc. So when he tried to mention about the great war that happened between the Alexander the Great and the Indian king Porus, he described it in a vivid fashion. So our Indian king Porus, he fought with Alexander. He took the army with the elephants, almost 200 elephants. So Alexander's army has never seen such kind of a battle with a king coming and fighting with elephants. And you know the power of elephant, right? Especially in that chaotic war front, with the whole kind of hullabulla, the elephant is going to make a ruckus, and that is where the enemy, the army, they are going to be frightened. But Alexander did something slightly different, but I'm not sure whether that has yielded results. But he tried to send his horse army, the battalion of horses, on top of which tins were placed and the containers were placed, and these containers had one of the petroleum products known as naphtha. I think all of you know what is naphtha, which is coming from a petroleum refinery. So this naphtha was put in a container, and the container was tied up on the top of the horse, and the naphtha container was put into flames, and the horses started going in all directions, and it started mingling with the elephant army, and the elephants got frightened, and finally the elephant battalion could be tackled by Alexander with the help of horses and one of the petroleum products as known as naphtha. And if you recollect the calendar year, all this battle happened in 326 BC before Christ. So long ago, Alexander Great has used naphtha, but I'm not sure whether there was any reference how he got the naphtha, from where he got the naphtha, whether it was occurring from a asphaltic lake, or whether someone has distilled crude oil. So all those details I could not find out. So this is the earliest reference. If you are planning to take a session for your trainees about the history of oil and gas industry, probably this is one of the business story you can mention, so that the audience will be engrossed in your story, and then they will be keen to listen to your session. So this is how we can start with your session. So now let me come back to contemporary days. So I'm going to talk about a personal experience. So I did my PhD program from University of Petroleum, Dehradun, and on 3 or 4 different occasions, I have to face the panel members. One during the synopsis submission session, the next one during abstract submission session, and finally on my final thesis submission. My topic was on cyber security with relevant to Indian oil and gas industry. So it was a management subject, developing cyber security mandate for the Indian oil and gas industry. That was my topic. And every time, the time given was 15 minutes. And I also happened to see how other people were presenting. So along with the panel members, the student, the research scholars also sit, and if needed, they can also ask questions. So I found that many people come out with 50 slides for 15 minutes, and finally they could not manage their time. So one key lesson by observing that was to reduce the number of slides and reduce the text in your content, and also to grab the attention of the panel members within the first 1 minute. So the very first slide, instead of talking about what is cyber security, what are all the impact, so why at all cyber security need to be taken care, facts and figures. Instead of that, I started with a slide where I only had two images. One, the logo of ONGC. On the other side, the right hand side, I had the number 197. Now I am asking you, can you make a guess? What is this to the logo and this number refer to? Can anyone tell? So, what is the connection between 197 and this uh, upstream company, Indian upstream company, ONGC? We can use the chat window. So, if you can make a wild guess. Anyone? Would anyone like to give a try? Okay, let me go ahead and then complete the story. So ONGC, I think many of us think that it is an upstream company involved in exploration drilling, but today it is also an integrated oil and gas company, meaning that they are also present in the downstream. So actually, the Mangalore refinery, the S12 Mangalore Refinery Corporation, is now part of ONGC. So ONGC is involved in the downstream petroleum refining business, and obviously they have to sell their product locally as well as overseas. So again, one of their product was naphtha, and naphtha consignment was supposed to go to one of the Middle East customers. So so this was regularly going on. So the naphtha used to go to the Middle East customer on a specific periodicity. At one particular point of time, they were not receiving the payment from the customer, which was due on a particular date. And when they tried to catch up with the customer told that they already made the payment, but there was no evidence for them to see the proof of payment. And finally, when they started doing some kind of investigation, they came to know that some bad elements, they have tried to penetrate the system, and then they made a small modification in the email ID. So instead of invoice at ongc.com, someone has created a new email ID saying that invoice at ognc.com, and asked the customer to make the payment to a new bank account. So unfortunately, the customer did not cross-check through telephonic means or some other means. Then they confirmed through mail, and finally, the third party asked them to make the payment. And at the end of the day, the customer has made the payment not to ONGC but to some other third party, which is nowhere related to oil and gas business. And the amount transaction that happened in a single transaction was 197 crores. 197 crores they lost due to a small breach in the security aspect. So of course, this is the simplest mistake that could have happened to any other customer. It is not a serious cyber security. What is that? I cannot say that someone has hacked their system or something like that, but probably this could have happened with the help of a insider. So when I started telling this story, of course, I have not taken this much of time. I quickly narrated this in 1 to 2 minutes. So the entire audience, they were keen to listen to my presentation, and that is where I tried to grab their attention. So always start your presentation with an attention-grabbing story, so that within 1 minute you grab their attention. It can be an interesting story. You can ask question, or you can come out with some startling fact. Now let me move on to, so today I'm going to share some 5 or 6 stories in the given time, and each has got some take home value. So it is not just for the sake of telling story, or not for whiling away my given time. So you can tell an appropriate story, and then finally you can drive home a corporate core value, right? So this is about one of the largest private sector refinery, that is the Reliance Jamnagar refinery. So whenever a refinery is being constructed, so the refineries produce lot of fuels, hydrocarbons, diesel, petrol, naphtha, all are fuels. And obviously, when these fuels are burnt, you are going to spoil the atmosphere because you are going to create pollution. So not only you are creating pollution when you sell your product in the market, you are also creating a little bit of pollution in the refinery, because you are, as a refiner, you are consuming your some of your fuels like fuel oil, fuel gas. They are used as an internal, what is that, fuel in the furnace. Not only that, every refinery they also went out to some waste gases, predominantly hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. All these are let out in the atmosphere through flare stack. So obviously, refinery complex, the atmospheric pollution level will be high, and also the refinery will be surrounded by a lot of petrochemical plants, and definitely it will not be good for human habitation. So that is where every country has the environmental regulatory agencies come out with a stipulation saying that every refinery has to cultivate a green belt. What is meant by green belt? It is a huge surface of land where lot of vegetations are grown artificially. So it is not for an agricultural land. Where you try to plant more trees, and these, by planting more trees, the dust pollution is coming down. Also, the gases like carbon dioxide will be absorbed by the leaves of the trees, and this is a mandatory thing. And the size of the green belt will vary up depending on the throughput and the nature of the complexity of the refining complex. So when I was part of the refining industry, most of the refining industry, most of them, they belong to public sector, and they try to come out with green belt by planting some tree. The one of the easiest way to plant trees is to buy the eucalyptus saplings. Eucalyptus is a kind of tree, so it is easy to transport and it is easy to plant it. But unfortunately, this tree, the eucalyptus tree, has got thick leaves, and they are all dry leaves. They are not going to absorb the moisture. And in fact, the trees roots go in depth into the subsurface, and to based on research, people say that every eucalyptus tree suck 500 liters of water from the soil. In fact, after planting these trees, so this crude oil tank forms. The crude oil tank form means where all the tanks are located. So some of these tanks started collapsing, and it was not scientifically proven, but some of the engineers have they assume that the collapsing of the tank happened because of the eucalyptus trees, because they were sucking the soil moisture and water, and the soil properties were deteriorating. And finally, they had to remove all the eucalyptus trees, and then they had to plant some other trees. But while Reliance Jamnagar refinery was commissioned in 1997, it was the world's largest refining complex. And it is also one of the most complex refinery, because they had delayed coker unit, hydrocracker unit, FCC unit. So obviously the pollution level will be so high. But when they wanted to plant the green belt, they thought slightly different. So now, to have a green belt, the green belt is not going to, it is going to be a cost center. You have to spend a lot of money in planting the tree and watering, irrigating all the plants. So it is not going to pay a huge return on investment, except it is for social cost. So this is a threat, but Reliance thought it in a different way, and they tried to convert it into an opportunity. So some of the people thought, why not we plant some useful trees? So then they started planting mango trees, and they started planting different species of mangoes. Today, as on date, they try to grow more than 127 different kind of mangoes in a refinery complex. And today, Reliance is not only the largest refiner in the entire world, They are also the largest producer of mangoes, at least in this continent. So they sell their mangoes locally as well as they export it to abroad. And it is also one of the zero discharge refinery. It means that they are not letting out any of the effluents. So after primary treatment, secondary treatment, and tertiary treatment, the entire water is internally used for different purpose, like your cooling water and utility plant. And some of the waters go to the mango orchard for irrigation purpose. So this is a classic example where someone can come out with how a threat can be converted into an opportunity with an innovative idea. Let me move on. So each of these case studies, they have some kind of take home values, right? So this is again happened when I was part of the refining companies. So the crude oil tank, the crude oil tanks in a refinery, they are known as mandatory crude oil tanks because they are very much essential for the uh, interruption free operation in a refinery. So if we have 10 crude oil tanks, at least 5 to 60% or 70% of them will be full with crude oil, so that even if the supply chain you have any issue, then the refinery can continue to run without any interruption. And the capacity of the crude oil tank will be around 65,000 KL. 65,000 KL. KL stand for kiloliters. 1 kiloliter means 1,000 liters. So even when I say 55,000 or 65,000, 75,000, people cannot understand the quantum of it. So whenever I take a session about oil movements and storage, we have to start with the crude oil tank. So I ask my trainees to assume that imagine you store water in the crude oil tank and assume that you are consuming water from the crude oil tank for domestic purpose. So for domestic purpose, the maximum consumption will be 200 liters per day. 200 liters per day. So if that is the case, so how long the crude oil tank, if it is filled with water, how long that water will last long for a family? So I ask people to take their calculator and then ask them to work out and ask them to give their feedback. That is where people will realize the capacity of the tank. So actually, if you store water and a family of 4 people consume water, it is going to last more than 300 years. Imagine 300 years we can start consuming that water. But in a refinery, this crude oil will be consumed within 2 to 3 days, depending on the throughput. That is the size of the capacity of the tank. And normally, the level or the quantity in the crude oil tank is measured with the help of a by taking a dip, by using a dip tape. So there is a internal column when you climb on the top of the tank. There is a dip hatch column in which you will put the dip tape and you will find out up to what level the oil is there. So when you know the oil level in terms of centimeters, then with the help of the calibration chart, you can find out what is the oil level, oil stored there. And obviously, crude oil tank will also have some quantum of water. And before measuring, before taking the dip tank, you allow the crude oil to settle down. For example, if you receive crude oil from the tanker, from the jetty, then give sufficient time to settle down, 4 hours or 6 hours. After that, the water being the heaviest compared to the oil, water will settle down. And after that, you put a paste in the dip tape, and using the water finding paste and oil finding paste, you will be able to figure out what is the quantity of oil, level of water, level of oil. And through calibration chart, you will be able to figure out what is the quantum of oil, quantum of water available. So actually here in this refinery, they also had another source almost 300 kilometers away from the refinery. There was a small oil well from where the crude oil was produced. And the government of India planned to construct a small refinery there. So the refinery construction, obviously, it is going to take 1 year or 2 year from the day it is planned. Till that time, the oil need to be consumed. So they thought that why not we transport that crude oil by road to this place. So 300 kilometers, the tanker will move, come to this refinery and unload the crude oil. So, of course, I don't know about the cost implications, whether it makes sense to bring that oil, but somehow we have to consume that oil. And the capacity of the road tanker, I think all of you would have seen the road tanker of a gasoline or diesel. So almost the same fashion, the same kind of road tanker, the crude oil was brought in. The crude oil was brought in. And as I said earlier, the capacity of the road oil tanker is just 10 kl or 15 kl. And only one six such tankers they unload, then you can see the level increase in the crude oil mandatory tank, just 1 centimeter level increase will be there. The unloading of the crude oil from the road tanker is going to take a couple of hours. Maybe in one shift we may unload some 6 or 7 tankers, and only at the end of 8 hours you can see the rise in crude oil tank by 1 centimeter, and that also you can measure only after giving settling time. So actually this was going on for a long time, and we used to do all kind of accounting. And compared to, as I said earlier, the significant rise in the crude oil level increase is small when you compare the road oil. So all of a sudden, one day when this was going on, the operator concerned, he noticed that there is a leak in the flexible hose connecting the pump. Using a pump, the crude oil will be taken from the road oil tanker, and then it will be pumped into the crude oil tanker. So there was a leak, and the operator was puzzled and surprised to see that instead of oil, pure water was leaking. It was jetting out through the pinhole leak. So immediately he got surprised and he got shocked. My God. So instead of receiving crude oil, we are receiving water. So it looks like that some racket is going on. Something is mischievous happening. Immediately he tried to catch hold of the driver, and then the person who accompanied the driver, who is known as the cleaner. These two people vanished from the scene. So immediately the issue was taken to the management, and as well a police complaint was given. And finally it was found that the so probably the contractor or the lorry driver, so they were trying to cheat the company by bringing water, and they were trying to pump water into the crude oil tank, so in the name of crude oil. So this we were not sure how long this was going on, and unfortunately because of the settling time and because of the capacity difference, all this could not be figured out. Only because of that specific incident we were able to catch hold of the culprit. At least we were able to start doing coming out with a new checklist. So definitely this is an interesting case study when you are going to celebrate your Vigilance Day. So normally Vigilance Day, the top management will be giving some kind of awareness to their engineers, operators, to be vigilant on various aspects. So security aspect, cyber security aspect, plant safety aspect, so many different kind of aspects, financial fraud. So all those aspects, the employees, because oil and gas industry is a $1 million business. So even a small pilferage or a leakage, that is going to cost huge money. So that is why constantly we educate people on the vigilance aspect, and there are specific days, vigilance awareness day or something like that. So if you start narrating such kind of case studies or lessons learned, then people can understand such kind of interesting anecdotes, and from where they can take home the message. Right. So now, once again, let me talk about my own experience. So I started working in the refinery as the plant operator. So my initial first 5 years, I was in the tank farm operations. The tank farm operations, so most of them are all mechanical activities. The plant automation aspects are very less. In the recent times, plant automations have been put in place, and even in tank farm operations. So most of the activities are manual activities, and almost for 5 years, I was not very clear about how a controller works. What is the difference between open loop, closed loop? So all the jargons related to instrumentation, I was not familiar. After 5 years, then I moved to the process plant, and in the process plant, they are divided into different blocks: crude block, hydrogen block, lube block, FCC block. And under each block, we have different process units. As an operator, you are supposed to undergo training with a senior operator, try to understand the first of all the process flow diagram by going through the plant manuals. Number two, you have to do line tracing. So each line you have to trace in the field, and then you have to draw. So you have to note down where exactly the control wall is located, where blinds are located, where instruments are located. All that you have to, you have to be in a position to draw without any doubt. So this is line. Then finally you have to work as a standby operator, and finally one of the supervisors will conduct a test, field test. So this is almost like an exam. So they will ask you several, they will ask basic questions, and after that then they will also explain scenarios. If at all, if this is the scenario, what are all the different walls you will be closing, which wall you will be opening, and how will you coordinate with the other operators and ensure proper shutting down of the unit. So all that interactive sessions will happen, and at the end, when the supervisor is satisfied, they will inform the management, so and so Mr. A is certified to take charge of a particular plant. So then you will be focusing only on a particular unit known as hydrogen manufacturing unit or platformer unit. You will be an operator for 3 months, 6 months. After that, you will go and parallelly you will be taking training into another unit. Then again, that plant you will be certified. Then you will be able to operate 2 plants. So again, when they prepare the shift rota system, 1 week you will be operating this plant, other week, next week you will be operating different plant. So once you complete all the plants, the last step is to get into the control room. So the control room, before getting into control room, you should be completely familiar with your field operations, and then only you will be allowed to go to the control room. So control room is almost like a cockpit in a flight. So it is a very, very responsive position. So at times of emergency, you have to make quick decisions and ensure the safety of the plant, personnel, and equipment and assets. Somehow I was not very confident, so I was trying to dodge, and I was taking my own sweet time to get into the control room, and I was not at all getting into the control room. So some mental block was there. So in the meantime, somehow I cleared my graduation, and then because of that I got a promotion, and then I was transferred to a different unit. So I moved into the training center. In the training center, I was part of a division known as operator training simulator system. So in the operator training simulator system, which is in short known as OTS, this is almost like a flight simulator. So like how pilots are trained, here the control room operators are trained. So here we have to mathematically understand the plant behavior, whether it is a heat exchanger wall or a distillation column. We have to mathematically understand and do a math modeling. And finally, the math modeling we have to translate into computer generated program. So those days we used DECVAX VMS system and Fortran as the programming language. And we have to develop the model, and we have to mimic the complete control room system. Of course, though it is not connected with the control room, but the exact look and feel will be something similar to control room. So this is one of my responsibilities, to develop model for the plant. But since I already had 10 years of plant experience, I was also given additional charge of training operators. So by this time, when I try to understand all the plant behavior and the concepts, so I started understanding all the fundamentals. Then I was completely clear with the how each and every piece of equipment started working, as well how the plant is working in a holistic fashion. Then I started acting as the trainer. So each training batch will last between 3 to 5 days, depending on in which plant people are being trained. The very first day, we'll ask the operator to increase the throughput, decrease the throughput, or play around with the simulator system and get familiarized. This will happen for 2 to 3 hours. And after that, as an instructor, I will start giving some malfunctions or emergencies without the knowledge of the operator. So I will not say what kind of problem I create. And once a problem is created, for example, booster pump failure, when I trigger from a instructor station, which is a separate console, then automatically an alarm will be generated after a few seconds or a few minutes. And there you can see all the trends going haywire. And the operator's first job is to identify the problem, and then immediately he has to fix the problem. For example, the booster pump has failed, immediately he has to start the spare pump. And then the next step is to stabilize the plant. And finally, once the complete exercise is done, which may take 30 minutes to 1 hour, then I'll create another problem. So like this, in the next 2 days, all kind of emergencies will be simulated, and the operator will be completely familiar with the different kind of emergencies. Even if you are sitting in control room for 1 year, if the plant is running smooth, there will not be any opportunity for you to learn the different kind of scenarios. But in a simulator, you can understand all kind of scenarios. Then the last and important thing is shut down the plant and then start up. So normally plant startup is going to be a time consuming affair, and most of the accidents happen during startup. And here in this training simulator system, the trainees are given sufficient time to do the startup till they get confidence. And once they are exposed to this kind of simulator training, they can go to the control room in a very confident manner and operate the plant. So not only our own refinery operators, we also started making this training simulator as a profit center. We started training people from India and other overseas refineries. And most of the time, the end users know they are so engrossed, and they'll say they wanted to continue. Even the general shift office hours are closed by 4:20, 4:30. Our office will be closed, but still they wanted to complete that exercise. They will be totally engrossed. And since they are all visitors, we have to get director operations approval to stay for extra 1 hour or 2 hours and do this extra training. So that's what people are totally attached with the training, and I could see passion in understanding the system. So here, one of the key messages what I want to convey here is, now since I understand all these concepts and I tried to simulate all that, so my joy knew no bounds. So I wanted to explain everything from scratch to the people who come to the simulator training. So I'll completely explain about the open loop, closed loop system, starting from the sensing element, how the signal is transmitted to the I2P converter, and finally to the controller, and how the controller is sending signal to the final control element. All that I'll be explaining it in a very, very vivid fashion. And many operators, they have confessed and saying that I have never, even I have become a control room operator a long time back, but some certain activities I was doing in a blind fashion. I was not knowing the concept, but today after simulator training, I'm feeling so confident. Thank you so much. So people make such kind of conviction statement, that will make my day. So whether it is a simulator training or maintenance training, so if people start understanding the fundamentals, the lessons learned will be long lasting, and people will remember those messages forever. I see some of the chat messages. So any questions so far? So Nikhil, can I go for another 15 minutes? Do we have time? Sir, yet another case study where I witnessed this in my own experience. You know? So as I said, this has happened in one of the crude tanks. The crude tank, as I said earlier, it is huge. The crude tank, if you want to understand the construction, it is primarily a cylindrical vessel. The cross section is a cylindrical vessel, which is fitted on top of a huge circular plate. A huge circular plate is laid on the platform. On top of it, a huge cylinder is welded. No, here it is welded on the bottom, and on top of it, there will be a roof. The roof will be a cone roof or a floating roof. Floating roof means that the roof will float up and down depending on the level of the crude oil tank. The crude oil, as you all know, some of the crude oil, depending on their nature of location, they will have some sulfur bearing compounds. So if it is the sulfur bearing compounds, if it exceeds certain percentage, they are known as sour crude. So if the sulfur compounds are minimal, they are known as sweet crude. Sweet crudes are obviously costly, and definitely the cost difference between sweet crude and sour crude will be $10 to $15. And most of the refineries are constructed to process sweet crude as well as sour crude. But one disadvantage of storing sour crude or processing sour crude is your material of construction will deteriorate over a period of time. and you have to uh, take into consideration while designing those equipments, starting from the crude oil tank or heat exchanger or distillation column. So here in this particular case, one of the tanks started, the bottom plate started corroding, right? So are you able to see the cursor movement? I'm trying to locate the bottom plate. Nikhil, you can say yes or no. Cursor movement. Okay, let me move on. So this tank was already full, and this tank started leaking on the bottom plate. And all of a sudden, the crude oil, water, everything started coming out from the bottom, and it started filling the bund wall. So now it is going to be a huge potential safety hazard because this crude oil tank has got around 65,000 kiloliters of crude oil. Once it comes into open atmosphere, it is going to create hydrocarbon vapor, and if at all, if by any chance, if there is a flame, then it can be a potential safety hazard, fire hazard, safety hazard, explosion hazard, everything. So now what to do? I cannot go and do a welding here because already it has got crude oil, and I cannot plug it. I cannot put a M seal because this leak is happening somewhere in the bottom plate. Bottom plate is touching on the surface of the tank pad. So again, the engineers, the supervisors, they started doing brainstorming, and finally they decided to come out with an innovative idea. They said that they will normally any crude tank will have will maintain water level around 6 to 10 inches water level will be maintained at the bottom, and before feeding the crude oil to the process unit, we will measure what is the water level and what is the crude oil level, and depending on the crude oil level we will come to know about the quantity, and we will come to know how long this will last long for the plant, whether to 48 hours or 36 hours, and after that the tank will be switched over to another tank. So now we know it has got around 50,000 kiloliters, and to pump it out to the process unit, this is going to take 48 hours. And while pumping out, again the crude oil parallelly should not leak out. So the water level generally it is maintained to ensure that if at all if any leak, the crude oil should not come out. So instead water should come out. But once the water is level is completely depleted, the oil will start coming out, or sometimes a water, oil, and gas mixture will start coming out. So at this point of time, what they have done is, through one of the drain lines, they started admitting the water, raw water. Throughout the refinery, there will be a fire water header. So at any point of time, you can take water. They started admitting fire water through one of the outlets or inlet. So there will be multiple nozzles connected to the plant, the crude oil tank. They started admitting water, and they tried to adjust the water admission almost the same like what is the quantum of oil draining out through the leak. For example, the water leak is 50 liters per hour. Then 50 liters per hour water was pumped into the tank, and of course there was no flow meter. This water was admitted through a flexible temporary hose. So in order to ensure that water level is not going up, so if the water level comes down, the crude oil will leak. Water level goes up beyond 1 feet, then it will go along with the crude oil, and this crude oil is detriment. The water going with the crude oil is detrimental in the distillation column, because before distillation column, we increase the temperature to 360 degrees centigrade. The water will be converted into steam, and all the distillation trays will collapse, and the entire plant will be upset. So we have to maintain the level. So we started taking the water level every 1 hour. An operator will climb the tank and take the oil level as well as water level. So within a few hours, we were able to control at what rate the water need to be admitted. So by doing this exercise, and they also in the meantime, the contractor started constructing a artificial brick wall throughout the periphery of so normally there will be a bund wall. Bund wall will be almost some 5 to 10 meters away from the tank. so that in case of any tank leak, the bund wall will contain all the oil. But here they started constructing a brick structure throughout the periphery of the tank, so that if at all any oil or water is leaked out, that will not go outside. So this is how for almost 2 days we started measuring it, and finally we slowly emptied out. And once the level has come to the bare minimal, then the crude oil feeding was switched over to another tank, and tank was isolated and handed over for the maintenance. So the operators, engineers, people who are familiar with the plant operation, they have a lot of ideas. So we had to stimulate them. So many times we conduct a idea contest, idea junction, innovation program, innovation week, all that we celebrate. And instead of asking, hey, come on, guys, come out with innovative ideas. If you start sharing a couple of ideas, that will stimulate their thought process, and immediately they can think in similar lines, and they can come out with much more innovative ideas. So this is the yet another business story which you can use it when you want to trigger innovative ideas among your workforce. Then this is going to be my last case study. So this is again my own personal experience. So this is LPG bullet. So LPG is a pressurized gas. It is a liquid under pressurized condition. So it is gaseous when it is released to atmospheric pressure. Generally, LPG is stored in spheres, which is round in shape, or something known as bullets. So earlier, 30, 40 years back, people used to store it in bullets, but today most of the refineries, they store LPG in spheres. So like this, almost in the same fashion, we had 5 different bullets, and we have a platform to do the inspection. And if you want, you can go from one bullet to another bullet. You can walk around. There will be a monkey ladder here, and each of the bullet will be provided with a rundown line. Rundown line means the which is running down. The product will run down from the refinery to the, that is the product will be collected and stored here, and each line will be provided with a valve. The valve can be a hand operated valve, or it can be a control valve, or it can be an emergency spring loaded valve. And there will be a drain line. The drain line, the purpose of drain line is to, sometimes the LPG will contain some carryover caustic solution will be there, because LPG is treated in a caustic unit. Sometimes caustic along with water will come here, and we cannot allow that caustic to go into the cylinders which are sent to home. We allow it to settle down, and the operator will open a valve. So the valve will be operated with a spring loaded valve. So if you pull the lever, then the valve will open, and the caustic will be drained. Once after all the caustic is drained, once you release it, then the valve will close. So when LPG started coming out, the LPG, the operator will close it. So actually one of these LPG bullets were under maintenance. Some welding work or some modification work was going on, which was going on for 2 to 3 weeks. And after that, this was about to be commissioned. How do we commission it? What we try to do is, from the bottom, one of the bottom inlet, we will try to put water and fill the entire LPG with the water. And finally, there will be a vent line. The vent valve will keep it open. And once the entire bullet is filled, then with the water will start coming out of the vent. Then we know that the entire bullet is filled with water. The reason for doing it, to replace all oxygen. Oxygen cannot be allowed inside any hydrocarbon system in a refinery. So we try to replace the entire oxygen or air with the help of water. Then the water supply will cut off. We know that the entire bullet is filled with water. And what we will try to do is, all these LPG bullets are interconnected. The top vapor lines are also connected. I'll try to open the vent wall, the one of the top lines here, the adjoining bullet, and I'll also open the another wall here. So now LPG will here. This is a LPG bullet that is to be commissioned, filled with water at atmospheric pressure, whereas this is a live bullet where LPG is stored around 10 kg per centimeter squared pressure. And once the interconnecting valves are opened, the LPG will start coming because this is at higher pressure. It will act on the water. What I will try to do is I'll open the drain wall, and the water will be slowly drained out. And once all the water drains out, now I assume that this sphere is filled with LPG vapor. So no oxygen, no air, no nitrogen, no water. It is full of LPG. Once it is full of LPG, then I can start routing the product from the refinery to the bullet. So this is the commissioning procedure in short. So once I was an operator, so this is the almost the first few years of me joining in the refinery. So I was in charge of this particular portfolio. So this water was draining. So actually there was a, as I said, the spring-loaded valve. The spring-loaded valve was slightly corroded, and I couldn't. When I released it, it was not closing, and I was taking advantage of that. So instead of keeping on holding, I tried to keep it open and then left it, and the water started draining. And as a afternoon shift operator, 2 o'clock, I went in there. There is a level gauge here, dial gauge there. So the dial gauge was showing 80%. After some time, after 1 hour, it was showing 70%. After 2 hours, it was showing 70%. So then I calculated saying that after 6 hours or 7 hours, this will get emptied out. Then I calculated every 1 hour I came here, and then came back to the control room, and I was doing something else. After a few hours, this LPG filling plant. So filling plant is done by the maintenance crew. The maintenance supervisor from the LPG filling plant, he gave me a call to the pump house, and fortunately I took the phone, and he started shouting, "Sir, LPG line has burst, and the entire LPG area is filled with gas. So come out and then do something." So he just 2 words he said, "Sir, LPG line is burst." And fortunately, I took that call. Obviously, 4 or 5 of the operators were sitting. So if any of my colleagues, if they would have taken it, they would not have understood the context. So since I was monitoring the situation, I could understand what went wrong. So the moment he said, immediately I took my jeep, and then I went to this place. So it was just 1 kilometer away from the pump house. When I went there, there was a huge LPG cloud, and I come to know that the water draining has completed. I presume that water has come down, completely drained out, and then LPG started coming out from this bullet to this bullet, and it started coming out of the bottom drain line. So what I did was immediately I climbed this ladder, because this side it was heavily clouded. I climbed on this side ladder, and then I rushed through here, and then I started climbing down the monkey ladder. And this spring-loaded valve had a lever, and with the help of my legs, I gave a kick, and immediately that spring-loaded valve immediately shut off. And within a second, the LPG, whatever that was gushing out of the drain line, it stopped. Of course, there was huge LPG vapor around the surface, and because of the oxygen deficiency, I was feeling very dizzy. Immediately, I got into the jeep, and the driver took me to the first aid center, where I was given oxygen for almost 10 minutes or so, and then I became normal. And people started appreciating for my timely action. Sir, so you came and saved the scenario, because LPG, as you all know, it is one of the heaviest. It is one of heavy gases. So, like hydrogen, it will not travel to the atmosphere. Hydrogen is lighter, and hydrogen is one of the safest gases, while LPG is heavier than air, and it will settle down at the ground level, and it will be like a cloud. Since it's a colorless gas, you cannot identify. If at all, if there is a source of ignition, immediately can catch fire, and there will be huge potential risk. And obviously, a lot of activities were going on, but fortunately, nothing happened, and I could quickly close it. But actually, I was not doing a great service. Actually, I was the culprit. I did a blunder. That was a great learning for me on that day. So here, can you all just use the chat window and find out, tell me what mistake I did. One fundamental mistake. So these are all known as golden rules in any oil and gas facility. So one golden rule I violated, because at that time I was not very much experienced, probably 2 to 3 years experience. I violated a golden rule, and because of that, this happened. Any guess? So now this is the end of my slide. So now you can use the chat window, or you can unmute and inform to HSC. HSC cannot do anything because HSC people may not know the operational aspect. Only the specific operating group will know the intricacies of the plant. Even a person who is working in a LPG plant may not know about the storage area. Only the storage area person will know about each of the wall and all the intricacies. I cannot pass the buck to others. Any other guess? Inform the manager. No, I am asking you, what is the mistake I did? One gross mistake I did. So I narrated a huge, detailed story with a lot of. Yes, Shanmugam, you are absolutely right. The draining activity, whenever any draining activity, most of the time, no, the tank forms, tank will have water, and the water need to be drained before feeding. In case of crude oil, the water need to be drained. How is it done? So there will be a drain wall, and you will allow the controlled quantity of water to be drained out. And as soon as you see oil, immediately you are supposed to close it, and we assume, and again by taking oil cut and water cut, we ensure that water is completely drained out. This is known as feed preparation, that is feeding crude oil to the unit. Similarly, the product also, naphtha, kerosene, diesel, so all these tanks, after receipt from the refinery, you have to settle down and drain the water before pumping it to your end customer. Similarly, while commissioning, you are draining water. Any draining activity need to be completely monitored by the concerned operator. You should not leave it unattended. This is a golden rule. So of course, I have undergone a lot of video training. So before getting into the plant operations, and there was a video training how the draining is important. Probably, my guess is, after attending video training, someone should have taken a feedback. Right? So what are the key messages that you have learned by seeing this, watching this video? Probably that way the training center can ensure that the trainees or the new operators, they have learned it. Otherwise, no, by playing a video, you cannot assume that the people are trained. After that, you have to conduct some exams or ask questions. So leaving the wall unattended, any draining activity. And you all may be wondering, as per my calculation, this the draining activity should have been completed only after 6 hours. So actually the dial gauge, so somehow it got stuck at one location. After 60% or 70%, it got stuck somewhere. So it was not properly operating. And again, since the water level started coming down, then the rate of draining got increased, because now the LPG is putting its back pressure from 10 kg to atmospheric pressure. Earlier, this was full with water, but since the level is slowly coming down, now the draining activity is not in the linear fashion, it is in the exponential fashion. And that is where I made a wrong calculation. Fortunately, nothing has happened. So if at all, if any of the operators have done such kind of mistakes, all this can be logged. Not only logging into a system, people can come and share these kind of lessons learned. So that will be, so instead of playing a video, or instead of telling what is to be done, what is not to be done, that can be shared with the operators, and operators can realize that they are also in their similar situation. Probably they would have done similar things, right? Then they will take a huge learning, and then they can start implementing the safety rules. So this is how I think any operator within 1 year, they would have undergone a lot of interesting anecdotes. So all these things, as an experienced operating personnel, the whether you are part of process engineering system, or the training center person, or the hardcore plant operator or field operator, every day you will have some kind of learning will be there. Try to grasp it or record it, and then share it with the different stakeholders appropriately. Of course, certain things we cannot go and discuss with your customers, certain things we cannot go and discuss with external agencies, but find out whether this is an appropriate case study instead of just a mere PowerPoint presentation. Instead of killing people with bullet points, start using stories, business stories, interesting stories, appropriate stories, anecdotes. You can convey whatever you want to convey with the team and get things done. For example, you want your team to improve safety culture, that can be greatly enhanced by sharing appropriate case studies. If you want your team to reduce cost, and again by bringing appropriate stories, you can reduce cost over a period of time. If you want to maximize one particular product, again you can bring relevant case studies. So even if this need not be a personal experience, the incident need not have happened in your own refinery or your own oil and gas facility. You can also take stories from other places, but nothing like personal stories. Obviously, when you narrate personal stories, you speak with passion, and that with that passion you will be totally engaged with your audience, and that way that learning will be fantastic. So with that, let me conclude today's session. And if at all, if there are any questions, I'll